And in terms of, what do I see, what have I seen in the past 2-3 years during this experience in the machine learning applied to compliance and Regtech. So I think there's been some really interesting stuff. One of the most interesting things has been the evaluation and rollout of these models, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But this was kind of shocking to me because I grew up first as a hedge fund guy. I was a hedge fund manager in my early 20s. And I spent the rest of my career at places like Google or building my own startups that have very rigorous production rollout mechanisms, right? Because we're always rolling out models that drive the revenue. And I think that also when you look at the financial crime compliance space, it was kind of the backwaters of banking for a very long time, right? It was really not where the good people were. It didn't have strong budget. There was no real tech there. And then 9/11 hit in this big crisis mode, and then there was all these changes in these companies that came in with various different point solutions that have kind of been weaved together. But by and large, the technology culture in the space is still pretty primitive. And so when you think about how do you test models and roll them out, how do you evaluate them, how do you get machine learning and AI and model people together with the regulators and redefine how some of this stuff works, nothing has happened. So for example, model risk management and model validation, this is stuff which is borrowed from risk models, as in credit risk models, right? So it's not even thought through and designed, in fact, for financial crime compliance risk models. We just kind of stole the methodology and apply it here. And so I think there's a lot of rethinking that clearly needs to be done in applying deep technology to regulatory landscape in banking. And so far, from what I've seen, the evolution of the culture and the practices is quite slow. So I think even though the technology is there, that the biggest problem in the space, the problems that I've seen in the space are actually people problems, mostly. And then the infrastructure problems are just the legacy internal IT stacks that the banks have. So you have this mix of the rollout is slow because of people issues, and then the rollout is slow because of a sort of deploying into a legacy technology environment. And I think that although there's the hunger to adopt AI solutions has progressed much faster than I thought. So this was the counterintuitive thing. When we started in 2016, this was sort of pretty radical, and people were very skeptical about it initially. We had many pitch meetings where people were like, get out of here, you're just one of these naive tech guys and you think you can do this stuff. And now everybody is embracing, everybody is buying, people have RFPs out like crazy, people are all over it. So I probably massively underestimated how quickly this transformation would happen in terms of people's appetite to buy and adopt these solutions. But then I also probably underestimated the time it would take for these cultural evolutions and also the IT stack evolutions. So even though the banks, they talk about cloud, they talk about doing containers and Kubernetes internally and stuff, the real deploy story isn't there, right? So even though they're theoretically there, right, the actual deploys are not happening into those environments rapidly enough at most banks. So the reason I'm giving this narrative is this question of impact. That's what we're going to talk about on the panel today. And so for me, it's this double-edged sword. I think the impact is somewhat neutral right now, because on the one hand, the adoption is there, the aggressiveness to buy and attack these problems is there. People see the business case, they want to reduce false positives, they want to drop headcount, they see that they're missing risk. So all that narrative is there. So from an impact perspective on awareness, it's there. But adoption and rollout, I think, is happening way slower than probably most of us in this room would like to see.